Welcome to the first episode of Canway Youth Decode video series. Canway Youth is a non-profit organization focusing on positive youth development, and in the Decode videos, we try to translate leading-edge science, technology, and deep insights into actionable knowledge for a young audience. I'm Andre Rayner, president of Canway Youth. We are very privileged today to have with us Professor Michael Snyder, chairman of Stanford's Department of Genetics and director of Stanford Center for Genomics and Personalized Medicine. Professor Snyder received his PhD at the California Institute of Technology and carried out postdoctoral training at Stanford University. He is a renowned leader in the field of functional genomics and proteomics, in collection of big data for precision health tracking, and co-founder of and board director of multiple companies. Dr. Snyder is also known as medicine's most measured man, as he's collected terabytes of genomic, health, and wearable personalized data about himself. Today, I'll be asking him about leading-edge science and applications relating to personal health and key takeaways for teens and young adults. In other words, what steps our younger generation should take now to maximize our health today and in the future, and how to advocate for ourselves in this process. Professor Snyder, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
It's great to be here.
To start it off, a lot of advances in medical science tends to focus on diseases that affect older people, but at the same time, we seem to have increasingly serious problems for younger people, such as anxiety, depression, food allergies, obesity, diabetes. Before we jump to actionable recommendations for young people, can you give a panorama of how medicine today is different than in decades past, thanks to many of the areas that you've been contributing to, like collection from wearables, etc.?
Well, I'd say a lot of what we do is still in the research phase. It has not yet moved in the mainstream, but that's what we're trying to do. So we're in a world now where you can collect lots of data around yourself that was certainly not possible 15 years ago. For example, you can sequence your genome. You can make many thousands of measurements and molecules out of your blood and your urine. And then we do a lot with wearables. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that. So you can monitor your health at a level that's never been possible. I think the biggest thing we're trying to do is shift sick care into health care, meaning previously and currently we tend to only treat people when they're sick. Our big push is to try and monitor people while they're healthy and then keep them that way. Try to catch disease at its earliest time and correct that before it becomes serious. Later in life, a lot of diseases are caught too late, and then people obviously spend a lot of time trying to fix that, in many cases not successfully.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of things that some people may be interested about is you've had firsthand experience with how those collections of data has helped you with your personal health and alerted you to diseases, etc. Could you please tell us a little bit about, for example, how you caught your Lyme disease or diabetes, etc.?
Sure. So it started with, when I started this monitoring, we started by sequencing my genome, which predicted of all things I was at risk for type 2 diabetes, which was very surprising to me because I was not aware of that in my family history. Although in hindsight, it might have been there. I just didn't know it. But we sequenced my genome, and a tool Butte predicted, boy, Mike, you're at high risk for type 2 diabetes. It's a surprise. And then through all this very detailed monitoring we did on me, actually, sure enough, it turns out after a very nasty viral infection, I saw my glucose shoot through the roof. Not just like transient tag. I mean, it really transformed. So I was able to get it under control initially. It did come back, and I've actually been struggling quite a bit. But through careful monitoring, I have it largely under control. But yeah, it was discovered, again, predicted from a genome, and then picked up through this detailed monitoring. And then the other thing you alluded to was my Lyme disease. That was a kind of interesting story. We had just started with the wearables, meaning these smartwatches. We talked about that. But basically, our group, we're following about 100 people. They're getting monitored all the same as me, and one of the ways is smartwatches. And what we discovered, when they first came out, they were mostly just viewed as fitness trackers. We said, well, these are probably pretty good health monitors, not just fitness trackers, because they're measuring you 24/7. So we put them on our group, and wouldn't you know, about 9 months in the study, suddenly my heart rate shot very high, and I was testing myself with a pulse ox, which measured blood oxygen. My blood oxygen dropped, and then it turns out it was all pre-symptomatically. It turns out I had Lyme. Because of that, I was able to tell I had Lyme disease. I got treated by doxycycline, got it all cleared up. But it was a smartwatch and this pulse ox that alerted me to this, again, pre-symptomatically. Now we've gone on to actually develop this into a general test for when you're getting ill. We can show that for respiratory viruses, the same thing has happened. That your resting heart rate jumps up well in advance of symptoms, and we can tell that. So we have a real-time alerting system for people getting COVID and other infections by their resting heart rate jumps up. So you and all the listeners can join our study. Please sign up.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And that leads me kind of to my next question. What can young adults and teens do or ask their doctors to kind of get in on this idea of measuring their health and preventing problems?
Yeah, well, to be honest, most doctors probably don't know what to do. So they're kind of scared of all this wearables and genome sequencing and stuff. So you're kind of going to have to take action into your own hands. What can you do? Well, smartwatches or a ring, wear something that's monitoring you. So we can tell when you are getting stress ahead of time. The thing I just told you about with your resting heart rate, it's not specific for COVID. It turns out the number one trigger of alerts, we have these red alerts go off. If you are stressed, it's actually workplace stress is number one. And you mentioned mental health, which is a big, big issue for many young folks. And so it's an area we're new at. We're just getting started in the space about trying to monitor and catch people who have mental health conditions. I actually think the wearables and some of the other technologies we're developing should be powerful for that. It's still at the very early research phase, but that would be the goal, to track people. So one aspect is the monitoring that I'm saying. This is what our lab's really good at, or we like to think we're good at. We take lots of measurements on people through the watches, through other these omics measurements I mentioned, where you can sequence your DNA and other things. We've even come up with new methods where you can do little pricks of blood. I know what this is going to sound like, but you can do little pricks of blood, mail it in, and we can measure many molecules, over 500 metabolites from your blood, that give windows into your sort of wellness, if you will. So I think we're trying to make this the future medicine, and I hope it works its way into the mainstream at all levels. So one aspect is diagnostic. I think the other aspect is what can you do now? One thing I wish I knew when I was your age was this idea about eating well. When you're young, you think you're invincible. You're going to live forever. Nothing can ever go wrong. And so I had the world's worst diet. I did everything you could probably imagine. That wasn't so good for me. But I did. So what I would do now is I'd eat a lot better than I did. I'd get my sleep. There's just a few critical things. I always did exercise. That part I did well. Exercise, eat well, sleep well. Those are like the three most important things you can do just now. And then you can track your health to see how you're doing on top of that. And then I think for mental health, there's probably a series of things we can talk about as well there.
And then kind of on that wearables topic, what are like specific wearables or medical tests that kids or teens could do to potentially see these kind of things?
Yeah, great question. So for the wearables themselves, they really haven't gone into official medical tests yet.
Yeah.
So they're just on the edge. There's a few FDA tested things where you could measure heart failure, AFib, things like that. From some of the watches, and they have a high false positive rate. So it's still a little early days there. But you can enroll in like a research study, for example, where we can alert you when you do have stressors going on, like either mental health or COVID. But bottom line is they're showing that you have a deviation from your baseline. Something's up. So that's one thing you can do. You can enroll in these studies or at the research phase, try to track these sorts of things. Now, the action you should take, obviously, if you get, for example, if you're in our COVID study and you get a red alert, you can do a follow-up COVID test or other tests to see what you might have. I think if you are feeling mentally ill, I should preface all this by saying I'm not an MD, so I'm not officially licensed for all this stuff. So everything I tell you is the Mike Snyder personal opinion. But I think I think there's basic things you should probably do to keep your mental health as improved as possible. And one obvious thing is like you say, exercise, get enough sleep. And believe it or not, social interactions are a big deal. People underestimate that. We haven't learned how to measure all that. That's another area we're working on. Social interactions is a big part of human nature, and it's very, very critical for people's mental health. I don't think people realize that as much. So spending all day in front of your computer, and I'm guilty of that. I spend a lot of time in front of my computer, but I think, yeah, going out with your friends and learning how to interact with others is a big deal of your mental health. We believe.
I guess you did mention this a lot, but what are some like specific actions that young adults or teens could do to potentially prevent a lot of these problems, like sleeping better, eating better, exercising? Are there any like specific actions or things you recommend?
Yeah, well, sleeping better. I mean, at a young age, 8 hours is not unreasonable. Probably most people need at least 8 hours, certainly when they're younger. You get by with less when you're older, but people get too little sleep, probably number one problem. Believe it or not, eating well, we eat way too much glucose. People now eat 40,000 times more glucose than they did at the end of World War II. 40,000, right? So it's not a surprise that 9% of the U.S. is diabetic, 33% is pre-diabetic. And those numbers are skyrocketing. They're just going up and up and up. It's only going to get worse. So if we don't start doing something about that now, and now means at your age, quite frankly, yeah, we've just got this endemic that's worse than the COVID pandemic by a lot. So I think getting people to learn how to eat better, don't eat all that sugar that's out there. It's really not good for you. And one of the things we discovered is that we have these glucose monitors. This audience might be interested, but these are little patches you can put on. They follow your glucose levels in real time. And we all spike to different foods, meaning our glucose levels go up. And that's a bad thing. If your glucose levels are going up, it shows you have glucose dysregulation. In the long run, we believe you're most likely to get, type 2 diabetes or at least some form of diabetes. So we think getting that under control early and preventing diabetes is huge. So I would argue, eat better at an early age. The other thing people don't realize is timing is a big deal. When you eat is a big deal. You should not eat for 3 hours before you go to bed. Believe it or not, don't eat that big gulp glucose thing before you go to bed. You're not going to sleep great. It's not going to be good.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is timing is a big deal. Eat your biggest meal in the morning, most people tell you. And there's something there's a big area of interest these days called time-restricted eating. So instead of eating all day long, all the way to bed, try to cut your eating times within 8 hours if you can, believe it or not. So for some people that might mean, start at 9 in the morning and then, finish by 5. So there's now getting to be more and more studies. It's not all worked out. It's still an area of active interest, but I think if we learn to eat better and better timing, will probably wind up living longer, healthier lives.
And for any of the members of the audience who do want to take action on this now, where could they go to find information on potentially like what diet they should use, or even, for example, how could they join one of your studies?
Yeah, we'd love to have you join our study. So innovations.stanford.edu/wearables is how you would join the wearables study. But if you just visit our lab, Snyder Lab, and rummage around, you'll see the link with all the studies. We have a variety of different ones going on. Now, some of them you have to be a certain age requirement. You have to be 18 or older. So the wearables one, though, you just have to be 13 or older. And I think that's a good one for measuring, as I say, COVID infection, and we think stressors in general. And so we will be rolling out more and more studies. I think this mental health area is very, very underappreciated area. Something like 68% of people will have a severe mental problem at some point in their lifetime. And the number that have issues right now is something like 25%. It's a staggering number.
Yeah.
It's just generally hidden in the closet. And so I think we need to recognize this more, measure it better, and then intervene properly. And I hate to say it, but some of this intervention is eating and exercising and socializing properly. Don't hide away in a closet.
Then any last advice or words of wisdom for the youth?
Well, I think not only is this, do take better care of yourself. It's never too early. I wish I knew now. I wish what I knew now, I knew back when I was your age. I would have been, maybe would have pushed off my diabetes for a few years. That would have been nice. By the way, the diabetes and a lot of these things, that they become problems for all kinds of things like heart disease, things later in life. So taking care of yourself early should definitely live to a much, much longer health span. I'm one of these believers that we, especially your age, everybody, if you die before you're 100, people are going to say you died young. Your age, people should all live to be at least 100. And if you're not, it means that we're not implementing things quite right. And so I'd say it's never too early. You're not invincible. And simple little things, simple little habits. You know, when I was your age, I love sugar. All right, I ate sugar. We didn't know anything better. I ate ice cream sandwiches. That'd be my entire lunch. I'd eat like 5 of these things. But yeah, and I now know how bad that is for you. And it's funny, when you cut out sugar, you don't miss it. It actually doesn't taste great to eat something super sweet anymore for me. So I think you can train yourself to get off this addiction to some of these really bad things. And so A, get good habits early on. B, from a career perspective, I think one thing that everybody cares about is their health. Yeah. And so I think working in the space, you may realize artificial intelligence is a big area these days. Artificial intelligence is a big part of our research, and it's going to be a big part of health management in the future. We're going to have personalized management systems for you built on your own data that will help you better manage your health, because you're different from me, you're different from everyone. In these models, they really do have to be personalized. Yeah. And so we think bringing in data, building management tools that will manage your health will just become a natural part of life. And from a career perspective, not a bad area for you to work in.
Yeah. Well, Professor Snyder, many thanks for your time and the great advice. For anyone who wants to get a little bit deeper into some of these topics, feel free to pick up Professor Snyder's book, Genomics and Personalized Medicine, What Everyone Needs to Know, which is available on Amazon, public libraries, and bookstores everywhere. Thank you very much.